We're having some fun now. Got any Kleenex over there? Yeah. I'm telling you. I shouldn't be talking about those women, right? That's what God is getting back at me. God is getting back at me. Got a couple more of those? I can't believe that. Oh my goodness. That's crazy. Okay, we're online streaming and you can see me making a fool out of myself. Yeah, kind of. I don't need that. You got a couple more of those. And we're talking about women. And I just got nailed.
Not by a woman.
Well, we don't know. We don't know. Some goddess up there has got it out for me. He's got it out for me. This is crazy. Okay, where was I? 131, we're now showing a lengthy story about slave ship in America. You know, if it wasn't so sad and harmful, it would be funny. But CBS and other liberal news outlets like them just love to have a report or two about a supposed organization or person that mislead people. This is in addition to their sexual harassment. Give them confusing information. They're talking about other firms and other people that confuse people, mislead them. Give them prejudicial information, or don't give people what they're paying for, which sadly is exactly what CBS and especially CNN make a living at. Ironic and sad. And please, Mr. Anderson, you might want to mute over there.
Oh, am I doing something wrong?
And please, let's talk here about tearing down of respected institutions. By the way, if women dress in skin-tight dresses with a top that doesn't take care of their entire bosom, or they're running around in leggings which are telling men to take a look at this portion of their body and that portion of the body, and doesn't it look nice? If y'all stop asking for trouble, you might help the situation out a little bit. I'm sure CBS Radio will have a report on this, or TV will have a report on this soon, right? Just a note. We're talking about tearing down respected institutions. A lot of talk about preference or reverence to the FBI, the CIA, which supposedly, like the IRS, NASA, and FCC, are perfect. Perfect institutions with perfect people, of course. Then there are politicians. Dare we criticize a congressman, or heaven forbid, accuse the mainstream media of continually publishing fake news in order to protest their party of choice and moral and financial interest? Let's get real here, folks. Let's get real. Okay, back to the news. On February 1st, we find that Kate Upton is accusing Paul Marciano of sexual improprieties. And then we have a cutesy Super Bowl weekend article about how we need more women in the NFL. For some reason, my TV went out yesterday morning, but I'm sure there was some story about yet another man assailing womanhood, and how as men, we all need to get our minds right. Can it get any worse? Well, you tell me, as it also appears that the news media has found yet another ally in their effort to neutralize mankind. And I know you saw this, Mr. Anderson. February 1st article from LifeSite News. The Episcopal Church in Diocese in Washington, D.C. passed a resolution last week to stop using masculine pronouns for God in future updates to the Book of Common Prayer. This resolution to stop gendered language for God was passed quickly by delegates to the Diocese's 123rd Convention. If revision of the Book of Common Prayer is authorized, to utilize expansive language for God from the rich sources of feminine, masculine, and non-binary imagery. For God found in scriptures and tradition, when possible, to avoid the use of gendered pronouns for God, they presuppose. Over centuries, our language and our understanding of God has continued to change and adapt. The drafters of the resolution stated, the drafters said they're referring to God using masculine pronouns is to, and get this, limit our understanding of God. By expanding our language for God, we expand our image of God and the nature of God, they stated. We talked about FISA. Well, the FISA memo, as executed, has become a two-sided coin. If you're a liberal, you use it to make your case, although it completely leaves out any actual Russian participation with or without Trump. And of course, the long-awaited congressional report pleases all in the conservative camp. Before we go any further, there are two words that need to be familiarized with, that you need to be familiarized with. The first one is, and this is because words have meaning, the first one is polarize. To break up into opposing factions and groupings. In the 2017 presidential campaign, it polarized the electorate. To polarize, you separate into entities. We like to use the term partisan, which might help us to understand, for example, well, like the FISA memo. Conservatives now will be sadly expecting Barack Obama and Hillary and Comey their heads to roll. But sadly, that will not happen. There are others who might well fall on their sword. But in the end, the report, the release of it, is and will remain and will signify absolutely nothing, and strangely enough, will be used by both sides to prove their point. We're in sad shape, folks. We need to clean up not just the swamp, but our own backyards as well. I'll be going to a campaign preview tomorrow for a U.S. congressional candidate. What I will say to the crowd is what I will say to you all. It's not about who gets elected. We got Christian George elected, then went back to our cave and continued singing Kumbaya and getting in touch with our God feelings. If you elect them to Washington, you'd better be prepared to follow them there. I'll keep my last rep on a short string, but sadly, it was just me and not others like me. Oh, the other word you need to know? Cauterized, which means to deaden, dampen, dull the senses, which is done after the polarization. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. WNFFradio.com. When we come back, we're going to talk about a speech that the president gave on Tuesday evening. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson.
Faith, discussion, and so much more. Last Call with B.J. Edwards on WTVOradio.com.
Understand your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand for the times they are
we want this to stay on the air. I hope you all enjoyed the president's speech Tuesday. It was well reasoned. It was entertaining. Hit all the right buttons. He talked of unity, infrastructure, nationalism, great economy. Very manly speech. We thumped ISIS. America is now being treated fairly when it comes to business dealings across the world. The tax cuts are exploding the economy. Minorities are being brought to equal levels with all mankind. The speech was very, how do you say, well, presidential. President Trump apparently touched all the hot spots, even mentioning God a couple of times. Yoo-hoo. So we are well on our way to healing our nation, right? How many of you listening today really believe that? I know. Liberals hated the speech. And I think they are sinking lower and lower in the exact areas that were mentioned. Although every time they try to prove the president wrong, they dig yet another hole for themselves and America as well. They have to keep the division going because in their minds the midterms are coming up. And they desperately need to take at least the House of Representatives back. Why? So they can impeach the president. Further discord. Am I right? Not for the good of the order, although they would argue that, but so that they can gain revenge on an outsider who has up to now put chains around their ambitions. So did the president hit the ball out of the park Tuesday? From a quality control standpoint, I think a case should be made that he might have actually whiffed. Well, there you go again, BJ. BJ being BJ, right? Well, you decide. First of all, what are the problems in America? We see issues with foreigners coming into our land without permission and refusing at the same time, number one, to assimilate, and number two, to obey all the rest of our laws, in addition to stressing the taxpayer budget. In Tuesday night's America, you can still kill a baby on demand in America. Many of those who survived the abortion massacre end up in our streets, our schools. Many of them having been shot dead by their peers, gang members or law enforcement. In many parts of America, you can go to the restroom of your choice regardless of your birth equipment. You can marry a man. Our children are taught that life has no meaning. When they learn that lesson, many of them, who don't kill themselves or their fellow students with guns, often finish the subject off with drugs. Then there's the issue of human trafficking. Morals, we are taught in America, are relative. Really? That's why we still pay government-run schools to teach innocent, trusting children. And the news media confirms it. Multiculturalism and diversity. We even celebrate the unity of our diversity. Wait, what? Yes, we celebrate the unity of our diversity. Hey, the United States was founded on immigration, right? So stop your complaining. As an added bonus, our sources of information that we make our decisions will tell us that there is no God other than man and that the state is your daddy. I'm sorry. Did I miss that part in the president's great speech? Talking about our government-run schools? Talking about our morass? Talked about some of the symptoms. If he was a doctor, would you want him treating the symptoms or the cause? You tell me. But he did mention God a couple times, right? Well, that makes everything okay. Where is that speech this week? Did the president say that our problem is the same problem that had plagued mankind since the beginning? America has a sin problem, folks. A moral one. And with all due respect to our president's dropping God's name, our moral abyss was not once mentioned during that speech. As a matter of fact, we celebrate Americans' nationalism. USA, USA. Maybe if he had talked about the drug issue, which he conveniently ignored, he might have started there. So we can wave that old American flag as much as we want and hire limousines to help us carry our newfound American money to the bank or pat ourselves on the back because we now treat minorities almost like human beings. But the fact remains, America still has a huge moral problem. And until we address that issue, whatever we think we are building, it is being built upon sand. And as a builder par excellence, and that's how Donald Trump would describe himself, Donald Trump knows better. His self-proclaimed religious underpinnings notwithstanding. Of course, you'll probably hear this same message in your religious services this weekend, won't you? It doesn't matter how big your house is, how much money you have, how diverse and or conservative you consider yourself, or how much other people's property you freely give away. Our graves will always be the same size. The Bible, and we're going to talk a little bit about immigration today as well, but the Bible talks about a nation and its morals. In Deuteronomy, the Bible says, the foreigner who resides among you will rise above your higher and higher, and you will sink lower and lower. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. The moral base, the moral underpinnings. There will be a sign and wonder to you and your descendants forever, because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. Because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. Therefore, in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away. Hello. From the ends of the earth. Like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you will not understand. How many languages do we speak in America today? A fierce-looking nation without respect for the old and pity for the young. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, no wine or olive oil, nor any calves or your herds of lambs and your flocks until you are ruined. They lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. You know, I kind of shake my head, as I'm sure our Creator does, and think in biblical terms. Perhaps this passage in Deuteronomy will help you. What do you think, Mr. Anderson? What do you think God thought about that speech, that State of the Union speech?
Well, I think he, I don't know what God thinks about it, but I think we missed, like you said, we missed the moral issue, and that is the issue that God is trying to scream at us that we need to work on.
Yep.
And I wish our leaders would begin to address that. This phony morality that the Me Too group, generation, whatever they are.
Well, they're wearing their tights and their skin tight tops. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Made up like a harlot, standing on a street corner.
Yeah, or a barroom dancer. I don't know what these women are thinking. Obviously, they want to dominate the man completely and demoralize him to a point that He has no wiggle room.
And that's purposeful. I mean, part of it's the division, but part of it is taking away that important structure. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the natural family, the important structure of the family. First of all, you got to get God out of the road. That's what the communists wanted to do, right?
Exactly.
Communists also wanted to do something else, and we'll get into that a little later in the program. In addition to getting God out, they saw one other important entity that they needed to get out. And most of their planks really referred to that. I mentioned it lightly last week, but I really want to go into more detail today.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, but we have to recognize the importance of the family and what is happening here. Am I saying men are perfect? Oh, absolutely not. But this isn't really an excuse. But you've asked for men to be the way they are. You tease them. You allow them to get away with things that they shouldn't get away with. You encourage by not having said anything in the past, or not even demand anybody that said anything in the past, that they don't do this or they do that. And now all of a sudden, when all heck is broken loose, you want to pull that cord on the train and stop it dead in its tracks. But you're forgetting about something, and that's called momentum. And you have to account for that. Because there are people on those tracks that are going to be killed because you didn't think ahead. So now there's an issue out on the floor. I agree that it's a valid issue. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and the devil's in the detail. Yep, needs to be addressed. We're definitely not perfect. We've definitely been doing some things. I mean, I grew up in the 60s. If it feels good, do it. And, hey, the pill? Come on. Come on. Really?
And the bra opened Pandora's box.
Yeah. One more note on the State of the Union when we come back from break. We have a listener that commented on the State of the Union, which I think you'll find interesting as well. B.J. Edwards along Mr. Anderson, your last call. WNFFradio.com.
Mr. President, Mr. President, what are you going to do? I'm going to take off my coat and roll up.
Stay tuned for Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
Go out and play another round of golf. Throw a party at the White House and give a big show.
It's not what the president does.
Up to New York, take the
He is empowered by us. The us in the USA, you and I. You just can't leave things alone. It doesn't work that way. A listener, State of the Union. The true picture of our State of the Union is hidden in the open yet conveniently ignored. Despite what the president says about good things that are happening in America, the truth concerning the hearts of people is, are you ready for this? We are perverse, hateful, and self-serving, and a self-destructive people, always pointing towards others in our personal denial of the truth. Eve made me do it, Lord. Eve made me do it. Well, the man made me do it. Like the contentious woman of the Bible, the people tear down their own buildings, taking bricks out of the foundation. We have not turned from our wicked ways. More often we are fighting in our own households, enemies to one another. Satan does like to divide. Somehow, we don't see the real state of things around us as we continue to watch what the media and other paid liars try to tell us, not knowing if what they say is true or not true, having no effect on our conscience. Here's my nutshell. I see things in the nation despite the economy and executive orders. Again, this is from a listener to Last Call. And by the way, 614-423-4220. We'd love to hear from you. I think the president whiffed on the speech. How about you? You agree with Hannity and with Limbaugh, and he did a great job. Love to hear from you.
A lot of locker room patting on the back, isn't there?
Yep. Back to our listener. Murderous citizens killing their future by abortion. Immoral, unrestricted behavior, public and private. Sexual perversion is paraded in cities across the nation. Criminals are free while good citizens are persecuted. Justice is not justice, but more corrupt stealing land from ranchers and farmers and destroying families to profit. Fathers are absent, or good ones ridiculed, while women openly display hatred, and themselves, I might add. Families are destroyed by divorces. Dangerous drugs are freely distributed, even as medicine. Public schools teach another religion and un-American ideals. Accusers and liars are empowered, labeled as victims. True victims are marginalized. Theft is legalized, disguised as interest, fees, fines, and service charges. Military actions are not keeping our nation secure. States' rights are usurped by other powering federal infringements. Media creates news rather than reporting it truthfully. Tolerance is valued more than what is right. Fear porn runs rampant, shouting the sky is falling. Satanists, witches, whores, and perverts are ruling in high places, even in the churches. The hearts of men are failing because they are feeling hopeless in the face of this beast. The State of the Union is in critical condition, and there is only some minority groups who are aware and will not give in to the lies. There are only liars or those who bear the truth, wearing the full armor, carrying the swords, which is the Word of God. Some will hear and see, many will not. What becomes of our nation depends on if the people respond to the truth. Our new president might be there to give those who see an opportunity and take that opportunity and bring hope to desperate people. There's no place to run or hide now, folks. We have to see the light of opportunity and not criticize it, but embrace it on every level. It's time to restore our families and make the church great again, so as to make it an influence in our nation once again. We are rebuilding families by rebuilding the man, the godly man leading the natural family with Christ as the head of the household. Only the natural family can bring us back. Why families? Without family, what is there? Families will bring the churches back as an influence in the culture, and then rise up able men such that God fear, men of truth such that fear God, men of truth hating covetousness to lead this nation. Sounds almost like a prayer, Mr. Anderson.
I would make it a prayer for our nation.
So, 614-423-4220. I assume that you agree with me because I'm not getting any... People like to complain. I mean, if they're going to call, they're going to call to complain and very seldom call to agree. So I'm going to assume that all of you agree with me out there right now. And I appreciate that. I really do. It means a lot. We have the place where they can send money, Mr. Anderson? Not yet?
Let me give them my address.
I read a couple very interesting stories, which kind of accentuate where we're coming from with regards to morals as a world and yes, as a nation. One of our listeners sent me a story about a Dutch woman doctor who asked an elderly parent's family to hold their mother down while the doctor administered a fatal drug dose. And the doctor has been cleared under Holland's euthanasia laws. A Dutch newspaper reported that the patient fought desperately in an attempt to save their own life. That is one heck of a picture.
That is terrible.
What value life? The chairman of the Dutch government's Regional Review Committee, which considered the case, said, "I'm convinced that the doctor acted in good faith." Well, geez, then it's okay, right? And we should like to see more clarity on how such cases are handled in the future. Amen to that, brother. As a result, the case will be considered by the Dutch courts, yada, yada, yada. For our regular listeners, we talked to you before about foreign governments that have legalized euthanasia of the elderly. We, of course, have it here with regards to the young, or the preborn, if you will. In this case, the woman who was suffering from dementia had earlier expressed a desire to have her life ended when she felt the time was right. According to the case notes, the woman, who lived in a nursing home, showed signs of fear and anger. She would also wander around the premises at night. The end came when a doctor put a soporific in her coffee before administering a lethal injection. But as the doctor tried to administer the injection, she began to struggle, and the doctor had to seek the family's help to complete the procedure. Details of the case emerged as the Dutch considered changes in the law that would give anyone over 75 the right to assisted suicide. Mr. Anderson, you remember Charlie Gard from Britain, don't you?
Yes, yeah.
The baby who died last July after his parents' valiant attempt to bring him to the USA.
Right.
Well, apparently, the Brits are at it again because another British family lost the right to make decisions about their severely ill infant on Monday of last week when a judge ruled that the hospital may turn off his life support. The 11-month-old Isaiah Hastrup suffered brain damage at birth. His parents, Lonray and Takesha, said their son is responsible and deserves care. However, on Monday, the state, Justice MacDonald of the High Court, said further treatment is not in Isaiah's best interest, and the hospital may turn off the ventilator. Examining Isaiah's best interest from a board perspective, I'm satisfied it is not in the best interest of a life-sustaining medical treatment to be continued. That with profound sadness, in my judgment, the baby should be allowed to die. He goes on to say that the family has been in a legal battle. The mother pleaded her son's case before the judge. When I speak to him, he will respond slowly by opening one eye, she said. I see a child who is injured. He needs love. He needs care. I have it. I gave it. To say it is so poor, it's not worth living, that's not right. It's not their decision to make. What value life? The reasoning that we use here to take a life is astonishing. Astonishing. We have a caller on the line. Call her first name and how can we help you today?
Well, this is Roger.
Hi, Roger.
And you're just not enlightened enough, Jim.
I get that all the time.
You need to be enlightened.
Well, enlighten me, brother.
This old school thinking that you have has not served us well. There is a new enlightenment coming forward, and the old school stuff has got to go.
I'm feeling really bad right now, Roger. Okay, now I'm over it. I'm feeling better now.
Well, I guess the only thing I would add to the conversation and enjoy your program is take us back 30 years. Take us into the 70s. If you would have thought in the 70s where we would be with the killing of babies, with marriage, nobody in their right mind thought we were going here. Nor did the vast majority of people think we should be going here. But we are here. And it's not stopping here. So we're faced with this dilemma. Are we going to act like we did in the 70s where we just kind of let it continue on? Or is the church, are we as individuals going to say enough and start looking actively and aggressively for places to say enough?
But Roger, all we need to do is elect the right people to office, and the situation will take care of itself.
It is clear to anybody, pagan or Jesus person, that they don't want to help really us at all. Their self-interest dictates where they're going. Neither party has a market on helping, but the morality is clearly taking us down a road we're not going to be able to handle as a society. And here's the example, Jim. At Brown University, you can now proclaim your ethnic background. So if you are a white guy, you can check off on your application, I'm a black guy. This is where it's going. And our culture will not survive that. Women's sports with the gender identity issue. Do you really think ladies track and field is going to survive when boys can say they think they're a girl and they're going to run girls track? I'm sorry, it's not going to survive.
Great point. Roger, we're looking at the unrestrained nature of man. We're seeing it. The communist, and I'm going to get into this later on in the program today, the communists had to get rid of God because they couldn't have morals, because the state had to become God. They could have no other gods.
Absolutely.
In order to do that, you kind of have to break down the institutions. And the family is one of those. The church is one of those. Once you break those down, then you create that vacuum. And once the vacuum is created, then comes in the hero. But what people don't, Santa Anna said, those that forget history are destined to repeat it. What people don't understand, and we're just fraught with examples of this in our past. When you take righteousness out of the equation, all heck breaks loose. And we're not going to like it.
Jim, I'm not a pessimist. I'm not negative. I'm a realist. I like facts. People have no idea where this is going, but a few people who seem to be able to listen and keep their ears open, they have no idea where this ends up.
But Roger, just trust God. Get out of his road. Just pray, and the matter will take care of itself.
Well, I kind of like in the Bible, it says something about occupy.
Oh.
And I think when you read about John the Baptist, it says good men take by force. But we've allowed that to sound radical. We've allowed that to sound rebellious, when what it really sounds like is what the Bible says we are to do. There's nothing radical about it. And, I don't have all the answers. I know God's words does, but this idea that we can just sit back and let whatever happens, happen, go on. Well, should I say one city, Rome? Could I say the word Rome again? There was a time when Rome ruled the world.
Yep.
And no historian argues that one of the key elements of Rome's fall was sexual debauchery. Okay? No historian will tell you that did not play a key role. And eventually, the barbarians saw a weakness, and they came in and destroyed Rome.
Nothing left to resist. Broke it down. The field's open.
Well, history will tell you also, Rome tried to pacify people. Tried to
all the
go
people.
along.
All the
get
people.
along.
All the people. Not just some.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we're trying to do today. We're trying to, and I mentioned it earlier, we're celebrating the unity of our diversity. And that's just absolutely insane, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to break these all up into small individual pieces, and then we're all going to just get along. That's all. We're all going to just get along. Roger, we got another call coming in. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No. Good show. Thank you for the program.
All right, brother. Go ahead and bring that in, Mr. Anderson. You get him?
Yep.
Caller, you're on the air with BJ. Last call. I think we lost him.
No.
We did. Okay.
No.
First name, please.
Don.
Hey, Don. What's up? What's on your mind, Don?
How's it going? Well, I called in to slightly disagree with Roger. And, of course, regarding Rome, granted that the elite rulers and wealthy people of the days of Rome were caught up into sexual immorality and all types of weird stuff back then. But I believe
it's still weird stuff. It's still weird stuff today, Don. But go ahead.
I agree with that too, brother. But I do believe that the main reason for the fall of Rome was the peasants and everybody that was out there trying to work for a living were finally taxed so much that the rebellion became because of taxation, not because of sexual immorality. Because the people out there working for a living didn't have time. They had to work so hard back then from daylight to dark to just be able to survive, and for them to go, for the elite, to Caesars, etc., to come by and take more and more of their money through taxation. Finally, that's what broke the camel's back and caused the downfall. So,
I know that was a strong factor, and I think it's a great point, Don. I think it's a great point. To me, when I look at things, I always look at things in terms of the family and how the family is being broken down, in what ways. But I understand where you're coming from, and I think that's a great point. Great point. With all due respect to our friend Roger, but Roger would probably agree with you. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't want to disrespect him. I just say I've got a difference of opinion, because you got to look at things. The peasants and the workers back then were not in control of what the elite did, just as we nowadays are no longer in charge of what the elite does. And the reason for that is because of taxation. They once they implemented taxation in 1913, they just steadily went ahead and made it a higher percentage all the time of an increase in taxation. And also, as they did that and took away more and more of the income earners' money, then therefore that ended up being the process of which the husband and wife got jobs, and the husband and wife getting jobs left their children to be raised by someone else, and therefore the process of raise your children up the way that they should go became obsolete because people were still trying to make enough money to overcome what the quote-unquote government was taking from them. And so you gotta look at, if you're gonna look at the financial aspect of things, you've got to understand that if you don't have enough to overcome the laws and stuff that the government makes, then you cannot defeat them, and so you're going to always be the defeated. And that's just life.
Yeah, money.
And it can be. Go ahead.
Money is the power to make decisions. Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
Well, I was just going to say, we are battling on many fronts, and the destruction of our culture and society is, the big cause is division. And as we divide financially, as we divide morally, as we divide culturally with diversity, as we divide in education with science and other kinds of misnomers about what we need to do, climate change being an example, we're looking at so many fronts. It's really hard in some ways to know which one to stand on.
Yeah, did you read the comment I made on the chat thing? Okay, where I said lack of participation in the spiritual realm of promoting the gospel, lack of participation in the political realm of people with good moral standards is the downfall. Okay, we don't do that. We no longer can claim the right to be silent in those two areas. If we don't stand to speak in those two areas, then we have failed.
For a man to know to do good, not to do it, to him that's a sin. I'm quoting something there.
It can all be derived from the Bible, can it?
It all seems to go back there, Don. That seems to be where the plug in the drain is, right there in the Bible. Don, we appreciate your input always, and you keep plugging away, brother. You keep plugging away. You keep shooting, and we're going to hit something here.
Yeah, that's a race he cut out for me, so I'll be there until the end. You guys have a blessed day.
I got you. Thanks.
Later.
We a little early? We a little early?
Look, sorry.
Before we go to break, which Mr. Anderson can't wait to get to, obviously.
I'm just so excited for break.
Well, yeah. I've got water all over the studio. He didn't even bring his boat in this morning with him. Our friend J.B. Williams, and this has to do with immigration. I think this is a great point. Has an interesting suggestion that might help resolve the immigration issues. A problem that would let the good illegals stay and the bad ones leave. He's proposing a constitutional solution, by the way. In addition to ending the 14th birthright citizenship chain migration visa lottery and refugee resettlement from known terror hotbeds, those in the country illegal will get no amnesty, no pathway to citizenship ever. Instead, those without any criminal record will have 6 months to register as a resident alien. Noun, resident alien, plural, resident alien. To avoid arrest and deportation, they would have to register as such. All who do not register as resident aliens, which is exactly what they are, without that period will be arrested and deported immediately without exception. Resident aliens are in our country legally, and they are not in the shadows, but they are not citizens, and they will never have voting rights and any other citizen rights. They can maintain legal status. Resident aliens. Resident aliens. Instead of illegal aliens, let's register them and give them some sense of belonging. How about that? That's a compromise. We're not kicking them back. We're keeping them here resident aliens, as long as you're productive and stay out of trouble.
And no voter rights.
That's right, no voter rights. I think it's a great idea from Mr. Williams. We're going to take a break. Caller, hang in there with us. We're going to have to take our top of the hour break. We'll take that a little bit earlier. Is that okay with you, Mr. Anderson?
Yeah. I'm so anxious for a break. So here we go.
All righty. We'll be right with you, caller. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. Your last call, WNFFradio.com.
Stay tuned for Last Call with your host, B.J. Edwards.
B.J. Edwards along, Mr. Anderson. Your last call, WNFFradio.com. Call on number 614-423-4220. We have a caller, and I am going to read the Communist Manifesto and how it relates to the family. There's also a very interesting article, speaking of immigration, speaking of all the things we've been talking about women in foreign countries, that you're going to find very interesting. Who do you have on the line, please? First name?
Don again.
Don? Or did we lose him?
Looks like he's still there.
Don, you still with us?
I think he walked away.
Went bye-bye?
He went bye-bye.
Okay. What I Learned in the Peace Corps in Africa is the title of the article, Trump is Right, by Karen McQuillan. 3 weeks after college, I flew to Senegal, West Africa, to run a community center in a rural town. Life was placid, with no danger except for your health. The danger was considerable, though, because it was, in the words of the Peace Corps director, a fecalized environment. There's another word that starts with S that you could transplant for that, but you understand what we're saying.
Yeah, our president would put that in there.
Yep. In plain English, feces is everywhere. People defecate on the open ground, and feces is blown with the dust onto you, your clothes, your food, the water. Our trainer warned us the first day of training, do not even touch water. Human feces carries parasites that bore through your skin and cause organ failure. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined that a few decades later, liberals would be pushing the lie that Western civilization is no better than a third world economy. Or would teach 2 generations of our kids that loving your own culture and wanting to preserve it is racism. Last time I was in Paris, again, I'm reading an article from Karen McQuillan. I got this out of the American Thinker, by the way. Last time I was in Paris, Karen says, I saw a beautiful African woman in a grand boo-boo have her child defecate on the sidewalk next to the Notre Dame Cathedral. The French police officer then took steps back from her and ignored her. Senegal was not a hellhole. Very poor people can lead happy, meaningful lives in their own cultural terms. We are so egotistical. We see everything in our eyes. If it doesn't suit our eye, then it's not right. Whew, talk about pride. Our basic idea of human relations, right and wrong, are incompatible. As a 21-year-old starting out in the Peace Corps, I loved Senegal. In fact, I was euphoric. I quickly made friends and had an adopted family. I relished the feeling of brotherhood of the man. People were open, willing to share their lives, and they knew you, their innermost thoughts. They shared their innermost thoughts with you. The longer I lived there, the more I understood. It became blindly obvious that Senegalese are not the same of us. The truths we hold to be self-evident are not evident to Senegalesians. How could they be? Their reality is totally different. You can't understand anything in Senegal using American terms. Take something, let me digress a little bit here. I had dinner with my best friend last night, and we were talking about perception. And there are a group of people in the United States that perceive that they are being radically discriminated against, have been for years. And I want to tell you something. You could give this group of people the entire GNC of the U.S. economy 1 year's worth, and they still wouldn't be satisfied because their perception is reality. They think it's so. It is so. And there's nothing you can do. There's no way that you can possibly get your mind right to fit into their world. Think about that. And they are not alone. We are so divided, so cauterized, that regardless of what anyone does, and it's getting worse, and the number of ways we can do it are getting more numerous. Think about all this. Yeah, there is a solution. But you got to work at it. One of the things that people need to do, this is hard, very hard. One of the things you need to do is learn how to forgive. That is so hard to do. There's pride involved with this. It's unjustified in your mind. Yet the Bible tells us those that don't forgive, they're not going to be forgiven. And guess what happens if you're not going to be forgiven? Guess where you aren't going? Keep that in mind as you carry about in your daily deeds. And give your brother and sister the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume bad things on their part. It's killing this nation. Our prejudice is killing this nation. Our prejudice against white Christians. Our prejudice against nationalities. Our prejudice against political parties. Wow. All right. Back to the letter by Karen. The article by Karen. Take something as basic as family. Family was a few hundred people, this is Senegal, extending out to second and third cousins. All men in one generation were called father. Senegalese are Muslim, with up to 4 wives. Now, I'm not going to tell you what happens to the girls physically to their... Anyway. Sex, I was told, did not include kissing. Love and friendship and marriage were Western ideas. Fidelity was not a thing. Married women would have sex for a few cents to have cash for the market. What I did witness every day was that women were working half to death. Wives raised to food and feed their own children, did the heavy labor of walking miles to gather wood for fire, drew water from the well or public faucet, pounded grain with heavy-handed pestles, lived in their own huts, had conjugal visits from their husbands on a rotating basis with their co-wives. Their husbands lazed in the shade of the trees, yet family was critical to people there in a way Americans cannot comprehend. The 10 Commandments were not disobeyed, they were unknown. The value system was the exact opposite. My town had a medical clinic donated by international agencies. The medicine was stolen by medical workers and sold to local stores. If you were sick and didn't have money, drop dead. So here in the States, when we discovered that a 98-year-old father's Muslim health from Nigeria had stolen the clothes and wasn't bathing him, I wasn't surprised. It was familiar. In Senegal, corruption ruled from top to bottom. Go to the post office. The clerk would name an outrageous price for a stamp. After paying the bribe, you still didn't know if it would be mailed or thrown out. That was normal. One of my most vivid memories was from the clinic. One day, as the wait grew long, hotter in 110-degree heat, an old woman 2 feet from the medical aides who were chanting in the shade of a mango tree instead of working collapsed to the ground, did the old lady. They turned their heads so as not to see her and kept talking. Americans think that it's universal human instinct to do unto others that you'd have them do unto you. We think the Protestant work ethic is universal. It's not. My town was full of young men doing nothing. They were waiting for a government job. There was no private enterprise. Private business was not illegal, just impossible. It is also incompatible with Senegalese insistence on taking care of relatives. If the Senegalese wanted to run a little store, he'd go to another country. The reason? Your friends and relative would ask you for stuff for free, and you'd have to say yes. End of your business. You're not allowed to be a selfish individual and say no to relatives. The result? Everyone has nothing. The more I worked there and visited government officials doing absolutely nothing, the more I realized that no one in Senegal had the idea of what a job means. I couldn't wait to get home to the USA. So why would I want to bring Africa here? Non-Westerners did not magically become American by arriving on our shores with a visa or illegally. For the rest of my life, I enjoy the greatest gift of the Peace Corps. I love and treasure the America more than ever. I take seriously my responsibilities to defend our culture and our country and pass on the American heritage to the next generation. African problems are made worse by our aid efforts, by the way. Senegal is full of smart, capable people that will eventually solve their own company's problem if we stay away from them. We are lectured by Democrats that we must privilege third world immigrants by the hundreds and millions with chain immigration. They tell us we must mend America as a white, Western, Judeo-Christian capitalist nation to prove we're not racist. I don't need to prove a thing. Leftists want open borders because they resent whites, resent Western achievements, and hate America. They want to destroy America as we know it. As President Trump asked, why would we do that? We have the right to choose what kind of country to live in. I was happy to donate a year of my life as a young woman to help the poor Senegalese. I'm not willing to donate my country. I'd say that's somewhat profound, Mr. Anderson.
Very much so. And, you know, I'm just thinking, why move all these people over here? Why not just go over there and set up America for them there?
But you got to be careful, because what she mentioned in that article is you can't go over there and expecting to give them. You have to go over there and expect them to teach them how to work and respect.
Yeah, I understand. Teach a man to fish or give
Yep.
a man a fish.
And just because they're in your family, if they refuse to work, you're not going to eat. Wait a minute. Does that sound a little biblical?
Yeah, it does. I just, you know, why move a billion people to America? Why not? I don't know. I just if they want to help people on our ticket, so to speak, why not take their ticket over there?
I was particularly struck by the family structure, which told me a lot. If
The Senegalese family
Yep.
structure?
Yep. if I don't have to see the reports, the GNC reports. I don't have to see what they're producing. I can take a look at their families, and I can pretty much tell you what to expect.
Well, I just, you know, I can't imagine a man laying in the shade watching a woman work. I just, You know, that's
Mr. Anderson.
just
Now, Mr. Anderson.
That's unnatural.
As a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you know better than that. That's what we do. That's what we're built for. That's why we have to change, because that's our nature to do that.
You mean watch them work?
Absolutely. And to have multiple wives. Come on.
I've been living wrong.
You've been stinking thinking.
Oh boy.
I just think that's very telling. The living conditions and what we're bringing over here to America. I mean, I have relatives that have been to China. One that's in Cuba right now. I have no idea what they're being exposed. I didn't even think about what they're being exposed to medically. I'm more worried about the communism and what's left there and what might happen to them, how they might get trapped over there.
Yeah.
I'm not even thinking about the diseases that they could have, the parasites by just touching something that they could get.
Well, just think of the flu epidemic that's crossing our nation right now. Where's that coming from?
Yep. It's coming from other people, from touching them, from being around them.
And generally speaking, America's been pretty much under control as far as diseases go. We have a few, like cancer, that we're still battling, but these communicable diseases have been well controlled since, what, the 50s?
Well, yeah, you've got. But again, here we go. The moral thing. You have to account for AIDS and other like diseases.
Well, those came from overseas.
Yeah, but they're being spread here at our bequest. We have to have more of them, and they should be able to practice that freely, be it in our restrooms or schoolhouses or gymnasiums. Oh, man. We really need to get back to it. Let me tell you why, part of the reason why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. I'm going to get into the Communist Manifesto. We had the Homo Manifesto last week. I'm going to get into the Communist Manifesto. And this is from an article, Paul Kengor, who wrote a book, Takedown from Communism to Progressives, How the Left Has Sabotaged Family and Marriage. You're going to find this very interesting. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. WNFFradio.com. I did it once. I forgot. It's been so long. Man's a creature of habit.
Faith, discussion, and so much more. Last Call with B.J. Edwards on WTVOradio.com.
I'm going to have to get a drink of water. I'm back. I had mentioned last week that we talked about the Homosexual Manifesto, and we also talked about immigration and alluded to the Communist Manifesto. And we really deserve to spend a little more time on the Communist Manifesto. I got a little more in depth into this, and this is really, really insane. And by the way, if you've never read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, I think 1848 origin, you should, and especially right now because you're experiencing the results of it. Especially their desire, to abolish the family. But why? We know about the church and religion, but why the family? What precisely Marx and Engels mean by abolishing the family? The Communist Founding Fathers' disturbing views on family, marriage, sexuality, and more are discussed in details in the book that I mentioned earlier, From Communists to Progressives. Robert Owen, Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, Margaret Sanger, Margaret Mead, Wilhelm Reich, Betty Friedan, the Bolsheviks, the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxists, Mao Zedong, assorted 60 radicals from Beer Ayers and Bernardine Dorn to Mark Rudd and Tom Hayden, and on to modern groups like Beyond Marriage, campaigns, and various gay activist organizations, all just for starters. All these lovely people and groups have one main enemy. An enemy they mean to and are well on their way to fundamentally transforming, that being the natural, traditional, biblical marriage and family. Although they are varied in their beliefs, all bristle at the idea of a God or absolute designer who has devised internally established standards for male, female marriage and family. Communists today in places like the People's World at the website of the Communist Party USA, and even in the once military anti-gay places like Castro's Cuba, are embracing same-sex marriage as a long-awaited vehicle they've sought for centuries to reshape, redefine, and take down natural, traditional, biblical marriage, and to attack religion and religious believers, of course. They are besides themselves in a mix of befuddlement and joy to see the mainstream culture finally, with them, at long last, in one of their numerous efforts to redefine the family and marriage. This is not to say, of course, that you'll find support for same-sex marriage in the writings of Marx and Engels. They never dreamed of this. No group of radicals ever in the 2,000-year sweep of Judeo-Christian West ever contemplated homosexual marriage. The mere fleeting contemplation, the mere momentary notion, the slightest passing fancy of a man's legally marrying another man with widespread culture acceptance in the 1850s and 1950s, or as recently as 1980s or 1990s, would have been scoffed at as inanely incomprehensible. Marx and Engels hated the family. Nonetheless, along the road, they prodded civilizations toward the historical extreme spot we find ourselves in today. Some influential forces emerged as a far left that cannot be ignored. Among certain elements was a pronounced sexual radicalism that arguably helped surface the road to moral hell. The 60s, again, I experienced the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, led up to what we're looking at today. The ultimate destruction of marriage. The pill, free love, if it feels good, do it, no responsibilities. Hey, God gave it to you, you should use it, right? Blessed is he who has no family, Marx wrote to Engels. Again, Marx and Engels were no great fans of marriage and the family. Their final semi-partnership was a 1884 book published by Engels a year after Marx's death. The title, The Origin of the Family. Engels in a preface makes clear that the book reflected Marx's basic outlines in their thoughts. There and elsewhere we see, among other things, a fanatical push to abolish all rights of inheritance, to end home and religious education. You should be writing this down, folks. To dissolve monogamy in marriage, to preserve pre- and extramarital sex, to foster and tolerate, as Engels put it, the gradual growth of unconstrained sexual intercourse. By unmarried women, to nationalize all housework, to shift mothers into factories or into executive positions, right? To move children into daycare nurseries, to separate children into community collectives apart from their natural parents, and most of all, for society and the state to rear and educate their children. Does any of this look or sound familiar, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, sir.
But this wasn't planned, it just happened?
It was planned.
It was planned. So we've got the homosexual agenda. That was in the 80s. You've got in 1980s. In the 1880s, you had the communists working on this. Engels envisioned the single family ceases to be an economic unit of society. Private housekeeping is transformed into a society industry. The care and education of children becomes a public affair. It takes a what to raise a family? Society looks after all children alike, whether they are legitimate or not. Some of these ideas were already emerging in the Communist Manifesto. There, Marx and Engels include a shocking but telling 10-point plan for their new ideal of humanity. By the way, here it is, and I'm quoting. Abolition of property and land and application of all rent of lands to public purposes. Homeowner, landowner, a heavy and progressive graduated income tax.
There you go, Don.
Throw Don out a bone. Money's the power to make decisions, folks. If you got the money, you can make the decisions. Abolition of all right of inheritance, family. Confiscation of all property of immigrants and rebels. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of national bank with the state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Centralization of the means of communications and transport in the hands of the state. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Equal obligation to all work. Gradual abolition of all the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of population over the country. Free education for all children in public schools. Some of that doesn't sound like it's really coming after the family, does it?
But it is.
That's what the Communist Manifesto really says, and worse, desired for not one country, but the whole world. And to be sure, Marxism demanded despots to carry out these deeds. Only a fool would not instantly and intuitively realize that implementing this vision would necessarily generate mass bloodshed. That is why I imagine most Marxist professors dare not have students read the Communist Manifesto. But students read it anyway, without the instruction, and they believe it's actually a pretty good book with good ideas if you simply take the time to read it, and of course if it's implemented by the quote-unquote right people. But back to the point on marriage and family. Note that several of the 10 points in the Marx-Engels plan would directly impact the family. Look at points 1, 2, 3, 9, and 10. Among them, just a few highlights and comments. Note the call in point 3 to terminate all rights of inheritance. Marx and Engels saw inheritance as a menace that perpetuated the role of the traditional family. How could a classless society guarantee equality of income when some persons at birth were unjustly handed more income from their parents than others? How could a classless society guarantee equality of income when some persons at birth were unjustly handed more income from their parents than others? This is ironic given that both Marx and Engels, and this is interesting, existed and operated off Engels' inheritance, which subsidized their work, especially after Marx sucked as much money as he could from his own financial drained parents, who were very bitter on how he exploited them. Marx's relationship to his parents was plainly parasitic. Marx's mom openly expressed the wish that Karl stop writing about capital and start accumulating some of it for him and his family. Nonetheless, there was their recommendations: abolish all rights of inheritance. Of course, inheritance was about private property, which Marx and Engels despised. In fact, the central goal of the Communist Manifesto is just that. The author summed up the theory of the communist may be summed up in the single sentence: abolition of private property. Stuff. Point 9 in the 10-point plan of Marx and Engels called for gradual abolition of all distinction between town and country. Now, what would that have to do with the family? By a more equitable distribution of population over the country. This obviously and painfully affected families. For communist regimes in nations like Cambodia, this gradual abolition took the form of immediate overnight mass transportations at the tip of automatic rifles, a sickeningly drastic action that was vividly captured in the 1984 film The Killing Fields. Separate children from parents. In a series of influential writings published in the Kremlin in the late 1920s, Leonid Sobozevich, the leading Soviet urban planner under Lenin and Stalin, argued for a total separation of children from parents starting in the earliest years of the child's development. Likewise, benefiting a die-hardest leftist, he advocated absolute state power to steamroll those in government that got in the way of this exercise. Sobozevich argued for a total separation of children from parents starting in the earliest years of the child's development, insisting that the child should be and was the property of the state rather than the family. From cradle to grave. The state had the right to compel parents to turn over their offspring to specifically designed children towns. Therefore, towns needed to be built at a distance from the family. Such extreme family proposals by the urban communist would be incorporated within his plans for creating the ideal socialist cities. Again, this has to sound very, very, very familiar. Who's educating your children? How long do they have them? You send your children to school. 12 years later, do they send back complete strangers? Why are they strangers? B.J. Edwards, along with Mr. Anderson, your last call, WNFradio.com. We're going to talk about education in the Communist Manifesto when we come back.
Last Call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life on WTVOradio.com.
It's now WNFradio.com.
Did I not say that? Did I screw up again?
No, I was just filling in for you.
Okay. Appreciate that. Love this song, but we can't play it too long or they won't play us. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson. We've been discussing the Communist Manifesto and how it is key for them to obtain control of the family. If you don't have the family, what do you have? If you're a leader of the nation and you don't have the family, what do you have? If you don't have influence over the family, what do you have? If you destroy all the abortion mills in the United States and end abortion tomorrow, yet there are no natural families. Yeah, you've got the babies in them now, but the state is coming in and they've taken that new baby whose life you saved and they put it in an alternative home based upon what the government feels is right. Or maybe you have a parent that is an abuser or into pornography. What about divorce? All those attack the natural family. This is like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid is the natural family. And then the blocks that support it. And each one of them really has to be there. Abortion, the court systems, abuse, the list goes on. Those blocks have to be in place and they have to be taken care of before they can be put in place. So please don't think that if you get rid of gay marriage that your job's done and over with. It's not. The family has to be intact. And it's not mostly this, and you can look the other way on that. It'll come back to bite you and the nation you live in. And that is what happened to Rome. It is what happened to Rome. Money notwithstanding, Don. You had to have the destruction of the family. That is key. It's the thread. It's the foundation. It's the cornerstone. That you just don't do it without the family. In the beginning of mankind, when Adam and Eve was there, and Adam and Eve had nothing but the shirt on their back. Actually, they didn't even have that. They didn't have money. They didn't have any stuff. And then they started creating a family. And as the Bible tells us, and as secular humanist history tells us, when you start messing with that family, Cain and Abel, Rome, when you start messing with that family, you're messing with your nation.
Division.
It's part of it, yeah. That's a means, that's a vehicle. Marx and Engels wanted free education for every child in public schools. Why would they want education? Because that's where you lose your children.
Indoctrination.
Yep. At the epicenter of any vibrant nation is traditional biblical family marriage. And it has to be taught. What they were not only advocating, but vigorously and often militaristic pushing, is the most radical rupture of the traditional relations of all. So radical that Marx and Engels would be dumbfounded at the mere thought of where America and the West stand today on same-sex marriage, for example. We're breaking entirely new ground in the long, long sweep of human history. And the groundbreakers act as if it is no big deal whatsoever. To the contrary, they portray those against gay marriage as extremists. And of course, hate mongers. This is an especially exciting times for leftists, you know? Boy, they're like in a candy store, dazzled by their success, and even more so by their unexpected allies. I just picturing a Muslim and someone from the Me Too movement and somebody from the homosexual movement in the same family picture is absolutely amazing. Yet, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're transforming mankind by trying to transform what's natural. Almost trying to get into human nature. We have friends that talk about artificial intelligence and about what is it, G5?
Yes.
G5 and gosh, others that talk about giants and all these just exotic forms of threats to our nation. Satan doesn't need that, folks. Once he gets the family, everything else is cake. And it's up to us to stop that. We have to stop it. Because if we don't, we're in heap big trouble. Heap big trouble. I listened to a sermon last week from a pastor. And I was very impressed by what the pastor said. This is a huge church. Huge church. Growing. Pastor is a very good communicator. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. 3 services. Or is it 4 on Sunday? I think 1 or 2 on Saturday night. plus activities throughout the week. I think they even have their own school. But he said something that many of us have been saying for a long time, that if you're a pastor of a large church, you're not going to know everybody, and you're not going to be able to spend time with them. That admission from a pastor is absolutely astounding. I was drawn back by it. And he went into detail to explain why. And normally what happens is the churches will try to break up into Bible studies. And those Bible studies generally reflect the church, what the pastor said in the sermon on Saturday, and your interpretation of it. But I don't think that really gives you even what this pastor, I think, was meaning. Because he had mentioned something about small groups. And the people in the church need to get together in small groups. He didn't say Bible study groups. He said small groups. The church in America, as goes the family, so goes the church. As goes the church, so goes the nation. The church is important. But the church is composed of people. And it's composed of families. And it's composed of teachers and union members. And I'm using the term church corporately because I know some of our listeners are going to bristle when I use the term church. And look, by the way, we have to use the term church. We're in America. That's the term we use. America, church, Jesus Christ. Those are the terms that we use. Now, you can think it's a bad church. You can think churches in general are bad. You can think churches are entertainment centers. You can think all the things you want to about churches. But they're still churches. That's the word we use. You can't, trying to change the word. There's a, I'm going to make friends here. There's a group of Christians out there that insist that you need to use the term Yeshua when you talk about Christ and Yahweh when you talk about God. You have to use those terms. It's important that you use those terms. You can't use the English version God or Jesus Christ. To be a true Christian, you need to be fully immersed, baptized by a pastor who uses the term Yeshua and other Hebrew words. We're in America. We speak English here. Well, we're supposed to speak English here, I guess would be a better way to say that.
Some are trying to change that.
To keep the nation together, we're going to speak English here. Okay? Was it borders, language? What else? Borders, language, I can't remember the other one.
Families?
Define, yeah. Define a nation. We've lost our borders. The language, when you go to get forms.
Language and culture.
Culture, yeah.
We have a common culture.
Yeah,
Although
culture.
many cultures formed American culture.
And that's why we need people to assimilate, by the way, to become part of that culture. You don't come to America to continue the hyphenation. We're not a nation of African Americans. Well, actually, we are a nation of African Americans because we all, according to our secular humanist anthropologists, came from Africa. We all came out of Africa, so we all are actually African Americans. Americans of African descent. We're all that. Some closer, some more further in the past, but it's all Americans of African descent. But Americans should be used first. And I'm not waving a flag. I'm just stating a fact to you. Satan uses discouragement, he uses fear, he uses division to separate us. And it's all there. And if we carry on with that, as Christians, I mean, it's kind of like we look for things to, well, fight over. And we believe strongly. Hey, the Spirit spoke to me this morning. Yeah. You know what the Spirit said to me? You need to be using the term Yeshua. You better be using that, or you're going to hell.
He told you that?
Telling you this morning. And if we don't forgive, and if you're not fully baptized, oh, I hear you. The minors and the majors, right? We can differ on the minors. It's so disheartening. We could, as a church, we could turn this nation around tomorrow. But we're not united. Which is going to bring us back to the small groups and the pastor. Last week, I gave you a recommendation of something to do. The Homosexual Manifesto and the Communist Manifesto. I think there ought to be a family manifesto specifically designed to protect the family. And that we ought to demand that. Well, I'm going to add something to your to-do list when we come back from break. And it has to do with the church service that I heard on the radio. This is B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call, WNFFradio.com.
Last Call with BJ Edwards. Real talk about real life on WTVOradio.com.
We are back, BJ Edwards, along with Mr. Anderson, your last call, WNFFradio.com. We're all dried off now, for the most part. Had a little accident this morning. Flooded the studio. Just call me Noah.
Give a shout out to Michael from Tacoma.
Really? Hey,
Yeah.
Michael. God bless you, brother. Hope you're doing well. What does Michael have to say?
Oh, he says hi, and he says he likes our setup, and we're broadcasting loud and clear.
Oh, good.
And
Good.
he's in discussion with Biker Bill and Don there on our chat line.
Don't let him spend too much time with Biker Bill. Hey, Biker Bill. Need to hear from you, brother. Need to hear from you.
Biker wants to move closer to us.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think he feels alone up there in that Muslim land.
You can do that, but sometimes when you step out like we do, you feel alone too. Trust me, you feel alone, and you feel like you're not being appreciated, and that's really, wow. That's kind of ingrained into us. That need to feeling like you belong. So
That's what church is about, assembling of the saints.
well,
Small
yeah.
groups.
Yep. Speaking of small groups, you're just leading right into it today, Mr. Anderson. I like that. Last week, I left you a suggestion, and will again this week. And I hope you'll take this suggestion. I think, the more I think about this, the more helpful this could be, and the more healing this could be for the church, because we're at each other's throats. I'm sorry. We're at each other's throats. I'll take that call before I get into this. So if you bring that through, Mr. Anderson. You're on the line with BJ. First name, please, and what's your question?
I'm not sure he's there.
Caller, can you hear us?
It says Roger, but he's not. I think he must
Must have been a rear end dial.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay. So, and by the way, we are divided. And I think the suggestion I'm going to make here is really going to have, if church members and pastors, and even those that aren't going to church, that don't like even using the word church, were to think about this and to do this, I think we could heal some pretty severe wounds. And by the way, I can't drink the water for you folks. I can just make the suggestion like I did last week. You can say, gosh, I guess that's a pretty good suggestion, BJ. Yeah, I like that. And then
just spill it all over the desk.
Yeah. Stop it, Mr. Anderson. Anyway,
Couldn't pass it up.
I got I got this idea from the radio sermon I heard last week, and I sent this message to the pastor.
Good for you.
Pastor, in your sermon Sunday past, you mentioned the importance of small groups within the community. To wit, I say, amen, brother, amen. And with that in mind, I have a suggestion. I lead a locally based and also national organization called the Natural Family Foundation. Our goal is to get folks, Christian and non-Christian alike. I didn't say this, but I could say church attending and non-church attending alike, to understand the critical importance of the concept of the natural family. Now, I phrased that purposely because this is about the concept of the natural family. I remember being in a meeting with a minority group, and within that minority group, they're notorious for having children but not getting married. And I was chastised for bringing up the subject of the natural family because that doesn't apply here. Well, guess what, dude and dudess? It does apply here. The rule still stands. The concept of the natural family, one man, blue, one woman, pink, and a lifelong, committed, monogamous relationship with their biological and or adopted children. The key, the core, the foundation. That concept, as a matter of fact, sir, if I was in that meeting still, should be more important to you than others because you obviously need to hear it. I lead a national-based organization, Christian and non-Christian alike, to understand the critical importance of the concept of the natural family. Then I said it would be great to have a local group within your church that could meet and study what the Bible says about the family, as well as promote and live out the concept of the natural family. And I want to clarify here. I'm not talking about divorce, fixing up a divorce. I'm talking about relating the importance of the natural family to the point where you don't have divorce. You don't have infidelity. The concept of the natural family. There are other organizations out there that do that other end, that treat the victims. I'm trying to effect a cure, if you will, instead of treating symptoms.
Preventative maintenance.
Exactly. That's what I said.
I know. I was just helping. I have to say something once in a while.
Yeah. Anyway, it'd be great to have a local group within your church that could meet and study with what the Bible says about the family, as well as promote and live out the concept of the natural family. You don't have to come from one. You can be divorced. You can have all those issues behind you. But stop from day one. This is a lot like being converted. You now understand what you missed, what you need to be. And you're working your darndest to be there. What is wrong with that
Amen.
concept?
Amen.
Shouldn't that be in all churches? Come on. Think about this. What if all churches had a natural family group within them? The family started, back to the letter, with Adam and Eve in the garden, and have grown to a point where we're now seeing 7.6 billion souls that got here to America and elsewhere around the world. All for the most part on the backs of families. Do you ever think about that? When you do your history, they don't talk an awful lot about, well, yes, and this person was part of this family, and that person was part of this family, and the family was there. Yet they don't say that. It's just an assumed that it existed. And it was generally one man and one woman. Yeah, they did alter that, but when they altered it, guess what? Problems. Talk to Solomon. As goes the family, so goes the church. I'm back to the letter. Yes, it starts with the family, because if there were no first family, then we would have no first church nor government. Churches are composed of families, and as you well know, Pastor, the better the family base, the stronger the church. Do you think pastors have actually thought about that before? Mr. Anderson? He's busy. Church?
Sorry, I was
That's okay.
talking to the peanut gallery.
You're doing, and I know. Damming up the place. Churches are composed of families, as you well know, and better the family base, the stronger the church. No brag, just fact. An undeniable fact. And I'll finish before I go to the call. Lots more to talk about, but I'll leave the next step to you, Pastor. I can be contacted at the number below, and look forward to talking with you in the near future with regard to small family groups at your church. Thanks in advance, and in His name. You're on the line with BJ. How can we help you this morning?
Well, I don't want to be like a groupie, okay? but you touched on another nerve, and I'll make it quick.
You better.
Jim,
we like getting nerves.
Listen, I just want to study that book of Revelation, you know? I just want to have another class on the book of Revelation to know what's going to happen in the future.
Oh, that's important. I understand.
Here and now, the protecting of the here and now and the family, I don't know. I like that book of Revelation, baby. That's where I want to spend my time.
It is more exciting. It's less boring, and there's obviously a lot less work on your part. So I can understand that. And it's something you can share with people and get excited about. Yeah, I can understand that. Roger, I'm going to put you in a vice. I just made a suggestion, and I know you go to a church. And if you want me to send you a copy of this letter I sent to this pastor, I'll do so. But I would definitely appreciate it if you would approach your pastor or one of your church leaders and say, look, somebody ran across this idea the other day, and I think it's something we might want to consider. And that is having a small family group, or small family groups, however you want to phrase it in your church. But approach your church leadership and see how they respond to the idea of having family groups that study the natural family, its importance, that know their stuff, that know historically what happened, that know what psychologists say, that know within their own families, that know within their own church the importance of that family. I'm challenging you, Roger. I'm challenging you.
Maybe they could start helping write that manifesto.
Yeah, they could do that.
They could send BJ the ideas.
Yep. Did we lose Roger?
He went away.
Okay. Anyway, I really want to encourage all of you to do so. Or maybe you've got a better. I'd like to hear about ideas, whether you think they're better or not, whether I think they're better or not. I want to hear your ideas.
There's a lot are just waiting on the rapture.
Yep.
I think that's a stumbling block.
Can be, if you allow it to be. Somebody talked to me about that the other day, and I think I might have relayed that to you. And they were going through all these instances about the rapture and this and that and the other, and how it's coming soon, and these are the signs, and I'm looking for more signs. And I'm going to say, would you do me a favor? I'm a little busy right now. What do you mean busy? Well, I'm in the fields working right now. I'm trying to find more Christians. I'm trying to help the family to find more Christians. So if God comes back and I miss it, would you tell him I'm over here in the field working? Would you do that for me?
Yeah, there's still some that need pulled out of that pit.
That was not an extended conversation, by the way. It was not. It was not. Hey, listen, I hope we've learned something today. I hope we've motivated you in one way or the other. I hope I didn't get any water over you when I spilled my water the first part of the story today. I apologize for those that that I did not start streaming early today on YouTube. I apologize for that. But I won't apologize for trying to do the right thing. And I won't apologize for helping others to do so. And I won't apologize to those that it may offend, be they secular or otherwise. God did not put us here on planet Earth just to pray. He put us here to do. And He put us here to learn. And there's a strange thing that happens when you do. You know what happens when you do, Mr. Anderson?
What happens?
You learn. You take that Bible, you take that game plan, and you come out of the stands, you come out of the classroom, you go down the field, and you get your helmet turned sideways.
There you go.
Hit by a snogger-nogger. And yet, you're going to learn from that.
Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and wisdom brings knowledge, knowledge brings understanding.
That's it. That's it. That's all I got today, Mr. Anderson.
That's all you got?
Yep.
Ooh, okay. Well, it's about time to close up shop here.
Okay. Have a great weekend. Don't be like the groundhog. Get your head out of that hole.
Thank you
I don't
for
care whether you
keeping-
see the shadow or not.
Yeah, thanks for keeping the chat room busy. That's invigorating as well. And there you go. We have our small group in operation.
There you go. B.J. Edwards along with Mr. Anderson, your last call. WNFFradio.com. God bless all of you.
May the Lord pave the way of your path.
Join us next week on WTVOradio.com for Last Call with B.J. Edwards.